what's the creepiest paranormal memory you have? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I was living with my grandparents during high school. Well, one night I was at my buddy's and had a single beer. I came home around 12 and went to bed. Usually when I go to bed, I would put a DVD on for noise. At the time, I would just pop in Pirates of the Caribbean. Remember the scene where they're the boat when Elizabeth Swann is eating with Barbarossa? When the scene starts, there's a lot of chinging glass. Anyways, the paranormal part. I woke up to what I thought were glasses clinging, and I just thought it was the movie, but it had long ended. So I walked into the room next door. I was in upstairs, and I saw like this gray, foggy blue bar with patrons drinking and stuff. They were dressed like Civil War soldiers. Well, one offered me a beer before I was to die at war. I freaked out and slept downstairs the rest of the night. Or I tried, lol. The next morning, my grandma woke me up to ask me why I was on the couch, and I explained it to her. She doesn't really react, just asks me to show her what I saw. So we went upstairs, and I showed her where the bar was, tables, lights, etc. Well, it turns out her house used to be a hotel bar that effing Civil War soldiers were at, and I described the location of the bar in near perfect detail. It still gives me shivers, and I wonder what would happen if I accepted that drink. I was sitting in my bedroom, just wondering why sometimes I feel like there's something watching me, when I had a mild revelation. What if you can't ever see them when you look for them because you're thinking about it, and somehow they can sense that? Cue up 2 hours later, when I completely randomly shot a look at my bedroom door. I only saw a hand with 3 fingers, not a hand missing 2 fingers, but a hand with 3 large fingers, sliding quickly away from my doorframe. I leapt out of my bed, much to my surprise of my wife, and ran out and around my bedroom door to look at my front room. It was a 1-bedroom apartment, so nowhere else to look. There was nothing. For several seconds, my eyes darted looking for something, anything that would be anywhere, and nothing. Until I was about to turn to the bedroom, I noticed my glider rocker slowly rocking slower and slower, as if it had recently been nudged or pushed by something. I still get effing goosebumps thinking about that shit, and honestly, haven't tried looking randomly trying to catch anything ever again. When I was younger, I used to be afraid of the dark, so when I would wake up in the middle of the night, I would go to my brother's bed and sleep with him. When I was 10, I woke up in the middle of the night and went to my brother's room. I'm going to cut to my brother because he also experienced this. He was 19 at the time this happened. He woke up that night and he was awake, but his eyes were still closed. He felt like there was a presence in his room. He was scared, but just trying to make sense of it all by thinking, there's nothing in here. If there was something, they would make their presence known. As soon as the thought crossed his mind, he felt someone wrap their arm around his neck, and they started to choke him. He tried fighting against it, but he wasn't able to. This scuffle continued for about 30 seconds before the figure finally let go. He fell back to sleep immediately after. Now, back to my POV. So, I go into my brother's bedroom. I don't even leave the door frame because of what I see. It was a black shadow floating a couple of inches over my brother. It had a bit of a misty appearance to it, but it was definitely a shadow. For almost a minute, I stared there, confused as what to do. I was scared, and I still don't know why I didn't scream or turn the light on or something. I wanted to fight the shadow, but I thought that if my brother wasn't able to fight it off, how would I? I feel so bad, but I left his room and went back to sleep. The next morning, my brother literally rushed into the dining room, ready to tell my parents and I what happened. But before he could say anything, I told him, I saw a black figure hovering over you last night. To this day, he still gets upset with me for not trying to help him. Staying up to 3 a.m. on my computer, went to go walk to the bathroom, and as soon as I peeked my head out the door, I was face to face with a shadow person. The amount of fear I felt in that moment is indescribable. It was such a feeling of impending doom. I stood there in shock for a couple of seconds trying to process this, and I finally got the courage to take a step back and slam my door shut, lock it, and spend the rest of the night in there. I'd like to think it was my mind playing tricks on me, but it was so real. On the hallway across from the living room, we have a motion sensor light installed on the outlet for late-night kitchen runs. I was sitting on the couch, home alone with just my dog. My dog was just laying beside me when suddenly she sits up alert and stares dead at the hallway. As soon as I turn my head to see what she's looking at, the motion sensor light turns on. I was very confused as nothing was there. Then a few seconds later, my dog began to bark viciously in that direction. The most chills I've ever felt in my life. When I was about 8 or 9, my parents renovated the house. To get to the electrical wiring, they had to enter the attic, and the only entrance was in mine and my sister's shared room. When our uncle went into the attic to take down the old insulation, he found a bag of old church hats. My sister and I got excited and asked if we could have them to play dress up, but our mom refused. She then promptly took the bag outside and burned it. Later that night, I woke up out of a deep sleep for no reason. I looked around our dark room. I saw the shadow of a woman sitting at the foot of my bed. She was rocking back and forth as if she was sitting in a rocking chair. As if she realized that I was awake, she stopped rocking and turned to face me. I immediately ducked under my covers and stayed there until morning. I think my mom saw something too, because that morning we went to the church for a gallon of holy water. I used to teach in a middle school that was well over 100 years old, right in the middle of a town known for ghost stories and hauntings. Everyone on the custodial staff and most teachers had stories. My classroom moved to the second floor after a couple of years to a room where a student, decades prior, had killed himself during school. I vividly remember once meandering around desks in the back while lecturing at a face was just right in front of mine, so I turned. I kind of bobbed and power walked the other way, but the rush of anxiety, shock, fear, and confusion had me stunned. My next few sentences were full of ums and probably didn't make sense, but I just kept going and eventually found my footing again. Then, when the kids left and I had the room to myself, a couple things went falling off the table in the back unprovoked. Honestly, compared to other stories from around the building, I'm kind of disappointed that's the best or worst I ever got. In very rural Appalachia, I was passing an abandoned house that was being used as a shelter for wild animals. This day, a bunch of feral cats were gathered in a circle around a rotting rocking chair. There was no wind, and the rocking chair started moving. Then all of a sudden, the chair stopped, and all the cats turned to look at me. I noped out. We used to live in a house that we were sure was a little bit haunted. Anywho, my legs jump sometimes when I get really tired or stressed. When they do, I'd go and sleep on the couch so my wife wouldn't wake up. I didn't go into the guest suite portion of the house because haunted. Literally, lights would flicker and it would get just randomly cold if we stayed up too late watching TV. The only way to stay up past like 12 was to light a fire in the fireplace and read a book or listen to chill music. The joke was that it was some old curmudgeon and ultimately harmless, so we played along. It was sort of novel. Well, it was 2 to 3 a.m. by the time I settled down on the couch. I fell asleep for maybe 30 minutes. The cold is honestly what woke me up, like getting chill bumps that don't stop being prickly and grab you by the spine, like walking into a deep freeze. Then it was like someone nudged my shoulder as if to get my attention. I looked up at the ceiling fan only to see it do two things happen. 1, it turned on and I heard the pull chain click. 2, the pull chain then moved like someone was pulling it 90 degrees, so it was parallel with the floor, not hanging down. That's what freaked me out. It had never been able to interact with something physical before. I spent the rest of the night in the bed with my wife. After that, we made a concerted effort to stand up to it. Honestly, it worked. Weird little things here and there, but nothing like that one night. I guess I just interrupted its chill evening time, lol. I missed the house. It was big for the rent, well built, and had brick and hardwood floors. I was about 10, had a friend over, but the parents went out. I was walking through the living room and thought my parents had sent an older lady to check on us because they were out. I took a few steps toward her. She looked up at me. The closer I got, I could see she was somewhat transparent. Absolutely ran for it after that. So when I was a kid, I grew up in a town in New Zealand where there were thousands of killed women and children as well as soldiers and natives, and I had my bedroom in a kind of basement but on the ground level rather than underground. And I told my mom that I thought there was a ghost in my room, so one night she got me to sleep upstairs with my brother, and when I woke up, she told me the ghost was gone. About 10 years later, I asked her about it, and she told me about how she had gone downstairs to my room at about midnight in the middle of summer in a heavy leather jacket, sweating her ass off with a stick of sage coated in frankincense, and could hear a child crying and a man yelling. When she tried to open the door, it was jammed shut. So she yelled, "Let me in," as loud as she could, bashing into the door, yelling it over and over. And all of a sudden the door opened and she fell through and felt a rush of freezing cold air brushed by her, mind you. She said it was 28 degrees Celsius that night, to find a chair sitting in the middle of the room. The voices had stopped, and she yelled, "Get out of my house, you're not welcome here." And a gust of wind came from the outside door through the hallway and slammed the door shut behind her, and she screamed, crying, "Get out of my house, you're not welcome here," over and over until the wind stopped and the room warmed up suddenly, and she felt an emotional weight had been lifted in all one moment, and so she slept in my room that night. So in conclusion, I have no idea if I believe her, but if I know anything about my mother, she is not the kind of person to make up stories. She has lived a pretty standard life, so I'm inclined to believe some sort of what she is saying, because it's something just so out of character for her. Anyway, sorry if this is hard to read. I'm tired and have dyslexia, so apologies. It was the periods, but you did great. The house I mostly grew up in may very well have been haunted, and although it never did anything malicious to me, it definitely felt dark. It wasn't a particularly old, like 70s, I'd say, or large house, and my parents still live there. The very first night we moved in, my little sister and I tiptoed out to the kitchen to sneak some soda, and we both heard very clearly someone say in a hushed voice, "Girls," as if to get our attention. Since our brother and dad were also asleep in the house, we figured it was one of them, and we just retreated back to our room. Either they or played a joke on us for over a decade, or they were being honest that it was in fact not them. There was a crawlspace entrance in my brother's room, which I always got a bad vibe from. Once, right below me under my bed, I heard a massive thump from within the crawlspace, maybe a raccoon or something I suppose, but it spooked me. Also one night, this is one of the strangest things I've ever seen, like physics, just can't explain it, lol. I was reading in my bed, and I hear this rapid, rhythmic tapping sound. I looked beside me, and my lotion bottle was literally going all the way back and forth from side to side. As soon as I noticed it, it started slowing down until it came to a stop, but it did not fall. I didn't hit it, there was no breeze, literally no explanation, lol. This story is kind of funny, but it gave me a chill. Honestly, I'm not, thank goodness, very perceptive to these kind of things, but my poor little sister is.